Namaskar viewers and a very warm welcome to yet another episode of the Indian Lawyer Legal Tips. Today we are bringing to you a topic that would interest all those people who were affected by the air crash that happened recently in June 2025 or even earlier. So today we are going to discuss the legal liability as to what happens when there is an air crash. I am Sushila Varma, advocate and chief consultant with the firm, bringing to you this episode. Today we are going to discuss a tragic and deeply significant event that happened in Ahmedabad in the recent Air India crash in June 2025. Let us now see what the law says about the legal liability in such disasters. In this episode, we are going to examine who can be held accountable in law, what kind of compensation victims' families are entitled, and how similar cases around the world influence the legal framework here in India. So let's begin. On June 12, 2025, when Air India flight AI 171 en route to Ahmedabad from Ahmedabad to London crashed shortly after takeoff, 260 people died on board, including passengers and crew. It is said that only 19 civilians died on the ground, a number that seems very unlikely considering that the hostel was occupied at that point of time. This was probably one of the worst aviation disasters in Indian history. The nation obviously mourns this particular disaster, but the legal machinery must move on and answer the critical questions as to who is liable. Now, who can be held liable or responsible in the case of an air crash? I would say there are four parties, four major entities, the first of which is the airline operator, the second would be the aircraft manufacturer, the third would be regulatory authorities, and the fourth would be third-party contractors. Now, coming to the first, the airline operator, the airline, that is the operator's liability. Airlines have a duty of care towards passengers and crew. Any negligence in maintenance, pilot training, or safety protocols can attract civil and even criminal liability. In this case, experts suspect that the captain may have cut the fuel supply to both engines, possibly due to error or misjudgment. If this is proven, Air India could be held accountable for negligent crew conduct. Now we come to the manufacturer. If the aircraft had a design flaw or an engine malfunction, then the manufacturer here, that is Boeing, and possibly the engine suppliers, that is GE, could be liable under the product liability laws. So far, data suggests no mechanical failure, but it's too soon to say. Then we come to the regulatory authorities. Air traffic control or the Directorate General of Civil Aviation may also face scrutiny. Was the airspace too congested? Were prior warnings ignored? These are questions that will determine the vicarious governmental liability. Very often when we are traveling by air, we notice that flights do not get the signal to land. That's probably because the airspace is congested. It's a possibility that even on that particular fateful morning, the airspace may have been congested and DGCA may not have taken the due caution that they were required to do. Then comes the third party contractors, which would be the maintenance companies, the ground crew, etc. If the crash was caused or worsened by negligent servicing, outsourced maintenance providers, etc., may also face litigation. It is only a matter of time before the investigation is completed and we will know who is responsible for this air crash that happened in June 2025. There is another liability that will be foisted on the insurance companies, and that would be the liability of all those people who have taken the personal insurance which we take when we are buying a ticket. We pay a very nominal amount, but anyone who dies after buying the insurance would obviously make the insurance company also liable. Now let us examine what is the international law that prevails as far as these kind of liabilities are concerned. In this case, it's the Montreal Convention 1999. Now, the Montreal Convention is a convention where many countries have signed binding themselves to what was decided in this convention. As per Montreal Convention 1999, airlines are strictly liable for up to 151,000 SDR, which in Indian rupees is around rupees 1.8 crore per passenger, regardless of fault. But if the negligence or wrongful act is proven, then there is no upper limit to the compensation. This means that if Air India is found negligent, families could claim a much higher compensation and damages, especially those passengers who came from foreign jurisdictions like UK or US, where victims have the right to demand a much higher compensation as compared to what happens under the Indian laws. Now let us see some of the insights or some of the incidents of crashes that happened very recently. Let us take the first example, Jeju air crash, South Korea in December 2024. The engine suffered a bird strike and pilots allegedly shut down the wrong engine. Despite having one engine functional, the plane crashed, killing 179 people. Investigators suspect pilot error and families are pressing for broader liability, including governmental accountability for poor airport safety. Another important incident that took place in January 2025 was the Potomac mid-air collision which happened in Washington DC. In this case, an American Eagle jet collided with a Black Hawk helicopter. Here the US government is being sued under the Federal Tort Claims Act as the FAA failed to maintain airspace separation. This shows that in aviation, even state entities are not immune when gross negligence occurs. In jurisdictions like the US and other developed countries, the liability is always very high as compared to our country. Now, let us examine the latest developments and the ongoing investigations that are happening in the Ahmedabad crash. As per cockpit recordings suggest that the captain may have intentionally or accidentally cut off fuel, but the exact motive remains unknown. The DGCA and the Boeing have both launched joint inquiries. A special committee has been constituted by the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Families have filed notices with Air India and foreign embassies, and reports indicate that Air India may face liability beyond its insured limits. This means we are heading towards a multi-jurisdictional legal battle, as some of the claims will not only be in India but also in the UK, US and probably other destinations. Now let us see what are the legal rights of the victims' families. Victims' families have the right to a fixed compensation under the Montreal Convention. Additional compensation and damages will also be allowed if negligence is established or proved. Civil suits for wrongful death in applicable jurisdictions is another likelihood. Class action or lawsuits, especially where the passengers are from US, EU or UK, is also a possible outcome. And of course, claims against the government will be there in case there is a regulatory lapse. Time is of essence. Legal deadlines such as 2 years for international air claims have to be strictly followed. I personally feel that insofar as the law is concerned, these incidents reveal deeper concerns. The first is lack of real-time mental health checks on pilots, inadequate transparency in crash investigations, very weak compensation caps under the Indian law, and of course the sluggish judicial process that we have in India. We need stronger aviation liability reforms, mental health protocols and better interagency cooperation before another disaster strikes. Dear friends, I remember after the air crash that happened in June 2025 when I had to take a flight somewhere around the 15th, there was certainly a fear in my mind as to what could possibly happen. I'm sure all of you also suffered from that fear at some point of time or the other. But ultimately, dear friends, it's a matter of destiny, and whether a plane will crash or not would all depend on your destiny. Friends, aviation still continues to be the safest and probably the quickest form of travel. But when it fails, the law must rise to protect the victims and hold those responsible and accountable when they have failed. Let us hope that the investigations are fair, transparent, and swift, and that justice reaches those who have suffered immense loss that cannot be compensated by money. This is Advocate Sushila Ram signing off from the Indian Lawyer. If you have found this episode useful, please like, share, and subscribe, and help us to spread legal knowledge to one and all across the country and hopefully even abroad. With this, I will say Jai Hind, Namaste, till we meet at the next episode. Thank you.